I'm here with Tony Mott at his house, and I'm here to talk about his new book, Rock and Roll Gallery. Tony, how did this book come about? 'Cause this isn't your first book, is it?
No, it's almost my fifth book. I did a book called Still Noise, possibly 20 odd years ago, with an ensemble of photographers. And then I did my own book, Every Picture Tells a Story. Then I did a book called Rock and Roll Photography, is the new train spotting. And then I had a massive exhibition at the State Library of New South Wales. And that was 7 years ago. I had a book out called Alphabet, went with that. And that exhibition was all supposed to go eventually down to Victoria to Melbourne. And due to COVID, it didn't. And in the interim time, the book sold out. And so as a consequence, rather than reprinting Alphabet, which by then was 7 years old, I just put together a new book, which is, there's a few repeats in it because it is, even though it's a new book, it's sort of an extension of the Alphabet book. Alphabet book was more catalogue. This is more what I consider my best ever work. It starts with the top 20 two sections of top 20. The first top 20 that I consider my most infamous photographs, and that are what I consider great photographs. Then there's a section with top 20 of bands I just love. So it's not necessarily the great photos. The best example of that is there's a Carole King photo in there, which people will look at it and go, it's not that great a photograph, but it's Carole King, and I love Carole King. And then it goes from A to Z, similar to Alphabet. So I put the book out for Melbourne as much as anything else, but it's available everywhere. And I'm off to Melbourne in the new year with an exhibition and the book.
And how did you get to start in photography? Were you young when you started, or?
I wasn't young when I started photography. So in the 80s, I spent a lot of time in Nepal and India. And I saw other people taking black and white portraits, predominantly of children. And you've got to remember in the 80s, people weren't aware of a camera, so people were candid. And I just loved the black and white photographs. And so I got an art student friend called Paul Mitchell to teach me basic black and white processing and printing 8x10 portraits. So I had a real interest in photography, but purely from an amateur point of view. I moved to Sydney. I'd been to Sydney already in the 70s, but I moved to live permanently in the early 80s, working as a chef. And I used to finish work at 11 at night. I was obsessed with rock and roll music, so I used to go and watch bands. And then I happened upon the Divinyls, before they were known, at the Piccadilly Hotel in King's Cross. Saw Chrissy Amphlett, thought to myself, that's got to be difficult to photograph. Lights going on and off, great performer. So for 6 months, just purely for my own love, I practiced rock and roll photography on Chrissy Amphlett. What I didn't know at the time was I was practicing on what I now consider the greatest female performer there's ever been. And when I say performer, pure performer, no one touches her. You can argue about the music, but not performance. She was the best. I got really lucky in so much as that timing. Music Press turned up in all the cities, free music press. I just started approaching them. I was never money motivated. I was just passionate about music and photography. And slowly but surely, it took over. And I took that first photo of Chrissy Amphlett in 1982. And by 1987, I was starting to consider I could possibly do this for a living. And I started doing it full time. Again, not as long as I could cover my rent, I was happy. But in actual fact, it just went on and on and on. And I became relatively successful.
And how did you do bands like the Stones and is that through that magazine or?
I was working for Street Press all the time, photographing 5 to 10 gigs a week, every week, and hustling. And Diane O'Neill, who was a publicist for Paddy Mostyn, Tony King, manager of Mick Jagger, not the Rolling Stones, were looking for a tour photographer. And you got to remember, this is the days before mobile phone. And Tony King left a message on my mobile saying we're looking for a tour photographer. And I genuinely thought it was a friend just, taking the mick and putting a joke on my answer. And I ignored him. And about 3 days later, I answered the phone and he was on the phone. He said, "Are you too cool that you don't want to tour with Mick Jagger?" And I thought, my God, it's Mick Jagger's manager. So that started a relationship with Mick Jagger. And 6 months after that tour, the aforementioned Tony King said, "Would you be interested in touring with the Rolling Stones?" And it just snowballed. I started doing a lot of international tours. I ended up with Fleetwood Mac, MC Hammer, lots of international bands. Plus I was constantly doing local bands. By the late 80s, I was doing album covers. And then the Big Day Out started, which is also a big thing. I knew Ken West from his days of managing Ed Cooper and Kate Sobrano and drinking with him in the Sydney Trade Union Club. And he said, he went to, I'd gone to England and been to Glastonbury and Reading Festival. And it always, I found it very peculiar that England, with the worst weather on the planet, had these amazing festivals. And back in Australia, we had the sporadic festivals here and there, but there's no festival. He did the same thing. He was at the Reading Festival the same time as I was. I remember the lineup. There was Iggy Pop, Godfathers, Smithereens, Ramones. And he just went... So there were left of centre bands, sort of indie bands. And he just went... he came back and did the Big Day Out. And he said, look, I need to document it. So he hired me. And 25 years later, I was still the official Big Day Out photographer.
So,
no, that was that. Cheers. Like a boodle.
So as well as bands and that, you do movies and...
So I did music for... I've been doing music for 40 years. In 2005, Paul Goldman, who's a very famous and possibly, arguably, Australia's greatest ever music video maker, was my best friend. And he asked me to do stills on a movie. I had no idea what I was doing. And that started a career in doing stills on TV programmes and movies. But my first passion is still music.
So you're really travelling now with the movie side of it?
I've recently been in the Northern Territory filming, but no, most of my stuff is in... I've got 13-year-old twins, so I'm in Sydney most of the time. So I do Sydney productions.
And
mainly.
You're still photographing bands?
Not like I was. I mean, I used to do 300 gigs a year, and now I probably do 20. And, you know, I get the odd call. I've got about 6 inquiries at the moment. I still love doing it, and I get the odd inquiry. And I certainly want to do it and keep doing it, but the music scene's not what it was.
And after this book, have you got plans for a notebook, or do you have photos?
No, I may do a book on my travel photography, which won't be as commercial, but I would like to document all my travelling photos at some point.
All right, so that's the future.
That's the future. Well, the future will still be movie and TV stills, but also I'm about to shoot The Cruel Sea this week, and I'm doing a girl called Jane Denham, a country artist. So that music's still there, and music is without a doubt my passion.
So are you travelling much, or are you doing these shows around here, around Sydney?
And they're nearly all in Sydney. I am travelling. I've gone back to travelling. I went to, this year alone, I've been to Bangladesh, I went to the Himalayas, and I'm going to Cambodia next year. I think I'm going to West Africa again. So the travelling bug's still there.
And this is for your black and white type photography?
Black and white and just generally photography. Sorry, I'm looking after the cat there because I want the cat to go upstairs to look after my boy. That's a personal little thing about life.
Oh, well, thanks very much for that, Tony. I really appreciate
Is that enough?
it. I've been following you for a long time, and as you know, I've taken up photography the last 13 years and videoing, so it's good to hear what you did, so I understand.
Yeah, no. It was always a passion. Yeah. Always a passion.
Yeah, I do the same thing. I don't charge at all. I give it to the bands.
Yeah, it's a passion.
Oh, thanks very much.
I'm going to rescue the cat and give it to